Well, summing up, a separate element of the case, a separate factual issue of the case. This will take probably 2 weeks. It'd probably be about 10 witnesses that have to testify. But we're summing up the issue of how was the lost order found. Not who found it. That's not our focus. That's not really relevant. What's relevant to our inquiry, to our case, is how it was found. Now, the historian cliques say the order was found by John Bloss, the first sergeant, Company E of the 27th Indiana Infantry Regiment, on September 13, 1862, when laying on the ground with Corporal Barton Mitchell and comrades, he saw what he describes as a, quote, large yellow envelope, unquote, and he asked Mitchell to hand it to him. And as he took the envelope from Mitchell's hand, Bloss says, a sheet of paper and a couple of cigars fell out. Kind of hard to get that piece of paper to fall out, but there it is, it fell out. Bloss read the text on the paper and recognized it was an order issued by General Lee. So he got up and, taking Mitchell with him, went to Silas Colgrove, the regiment's colonel, and handed it to him. Colgrove then, by some means, delivered the document to General Williams, commanding the 12th Corps, and Williams caused it to be delivered to General McClellan, who read it and proclaimed, the cliques tell us, and now he knew what to do. This is the story the cliques have cobbled together over the some 150 years that have passed between our day and the day the order was found in a field on the outskirts of Frederick, Maryland, on September 13, 1862. The story, as they tell it, is based solely upon statements made by John Bloss between that date and the date of his death in 1905. The first statement they offer is in the form of a letter claimed to have been written by Bloss several days after the Battle of Antietam, when he was in a field hospital being treated for a battle wound. But as the record stands today, the letter is not admissible into evidence because it lacks foundation. The letter surfaced in public view in about 2012 when a person appeared at the National Park Service's Monocacy Battlefield office and gave it to a ranger named Tracy Evans. Gave a photocopy of a snippet of the supposed letter. Not the letter itself, but a photocopy of a snippet of the supposed letter. This person, who Evans refuses to identify, also gave her a paper with typed text he claimed constituted the full contents of the supposed letter. Now, the written script on the snippet refers the order as found in an envelope of an unstated size. The second statement the Cliques offer is a verbal statement Bloss made to an audience in 1892 in Kansas. A year after Bloss died in 1905, this statement was published in a book titled War Talks in Kansas, and it reads this way, quote, "We were now in a meadow near the city limits. We threw ourselves upon the grass to rest. While lying there, I noticed, just beyond Mitchell, a large envelope and asked him to give it to me. It was not sealed, and on taking it up, 2 cigars and a paper fell out." Unquote. A third statement, which the Cliques do not rely upon, adds detail to Bloss's story. This statement, it is said, was made by Bloss in writing a month before he died in March 1905. It is claimed Bloss described the scene this way, quote, "We were advancing on Frederick. We lay down in the shade of a line of trees, and while lying there and talking with Mitchell, I saw over his shoulder, hanging in the grass, a long yellow envelope, and asked him to hand it to me. As he did so, 2 cigars fell out. Mitchell smoked one of them as I read the enclosed document," unquote. Now, in the trial court, the reason why there would be a contest over the question of these statements being admitted into evidence is that from the point of view of this lawyer, if the order was found in an envelope, that fact in evidence makes it unlikely that the order was intentionally dropped in the field. This necessarily is so as far as trial lawyers are concerned, because it is unreasonable to think General Lee would expect the order inside an envelope to be found. General Lee would know that in marching away from Frederick, his army would be leaving the fields around Frederick full of the waste generated by the soldiers camping in them for 4 days and nights. General Lee would know, too, that the ground would be churned up by the passage of the artillery teams of horses, the army's wagons, and its cavalry, and that the condition of the fields will be made worse by the enemy troops and wagons flooding into the fields in the wake of his army's departure. To the mind of a reasonable person, such circumstances mean it would be highly unlikely a Union soldier would entertain an interest in investigating an envelope he might notice among the waste and debris, making less likely a passing Union soldier's interest might be pricked is the undisputed fact that on September 11th, the fields around Frederick were inundated by a rainstorm, which lasted through the night and into the morning of the 12th. The consequence of this fact is the plain reality that an envelope laying on the churned up, debris-cluttered field through a 24-hour rainstorm would hardly be a condition, would hardly be in a condition that would attract even a scavenger's attention. Let's assume the court admits one or more of these three statements into evidence, leaving it to the jury to decide whether to give any of them credibility. To convince the jury none of them are worthy of belief, we offer substantial impeachment evidence in the form of other statements we can prove indisputably Bloss made during his life, which contradict the statements the historian Clix offer, as well as the testimony of recipient witnesses, which contradict them. For example, the first documented public statement Bloss made is found in a report made by the Indiana State Department of Education in 1878. In 1878, Bloss held the position as the department's superintendent of public instruction. And because of this, the report included a biographical sketch of his life, a sketch he no doubt wrote. In it, the story of the orator's finding is recounted this way, quote, "There was a pause in the march. The boys threw themselves down upon the grass." "What is that, Mitchell?" asked Bloss. "An envelope," was the reply. "Hand it to me." On picking up the package, which lay at his feet, Mitchell found 2 cigars and a folded letter. It was the dispatch of General Lee. Now, we have ambiguity here. The fact that while Bloss here introduces an envelope into the scene, in the next sentence, he has Mitchell picking up not an envelope, but a package, which lay at his feet. Now, the word package has several meanings. It could mean a container holding something. It could mean a collection of items offered as a single unit. So, in the Library of Congress today, we have what we call the McClellan's copy of the Lost Order, and it's folded. And it's obviously been folded like this a long time. We cannot say that it was folded like this on the day that it was found in the field at Frederick. It might have been folded this way later, but the creases are clear that this is the way it was folded, at least at the time it surfaced in the Library of Congress. So, a folded piece of paper wrapped around cigars, held together by a piece of twine, is a package. And we have no doubt about that. There's no ambiguity here. That's a package. But two cigars in an envelope with a piece of paper, that's a package. But from the perspective of Bloss and Mitchell, as Bloss describes it, what we see is an envelope on the ground. We don't know there's anything in it. Apparently, Bloss is interested in knowing of all the debris that's scattered all over this field he's laying in, could there be something inside of value? Like what could there be of value in this envelope? But we're going to find out. Oh my God, look at that. That's what we find. That's Bloss's story. Now, to clarify which it was that Mitchell found, an envelope or a package, we must turn to the recipient witnesses to determine the likelihood Mitchell found a package, not an envelope. Of these, the most credible is Colonel Colgrove, who Bloss, in the company of Mitchell, took the order. Colonel Colgrove made several statements of his receipt of the order during his life. In all of them, he was consistent in stating that he was handed a document wrapped around cigars. And that Bloss and Mitchell told him that they were handing him the document in the condition in which Mitchell found it. For example, in 1867, Colgrove certified in a letter he wrote to Mitchell for Mitchell's use in making a claim for compensation from the government that, quote, Mitchell found and delivered, unquote, the order to Colgrove. And in 1886, in a letter written to the editors of the Century magazine, Colgrove stated that Bloss and Mitchell came to him and said that the order was, quote, found by Mitchell near where they stacked arms, unquote. Colgrove wrote that when he received the order, quote, it was wrapped around 3 cigars. And Mitchell said it was in that condition when found by him. No envelope is present in this scene that Colonel Colgrove consistently described through his lifetime. Now, Colgrove has no axe to grind. He's not attempting to anoint himself as the wonderful guy that finds the order and saves the Union, as Bloss plainly was doing through his lifetime. Barton Mitchell, being dead by 1867, had nothing to add to the storyline. And so there, the question of how the order was found must be left to the jury to resolve. And the resolution of this question revolves, and the resolution of this question resolves the ultimate question of whether the order was intentionally dropped in the field to be found by a passing soldier, or accidentally dropped by a courier carrying it from point A to point B. And as you think of that latter scenario that Bloss tells us about, it's an envelope. It's a large envelope the courier is carrying on a horse. Now, does he have this large envelope in his saddlebag? Is he holding it in his hands with his reins? Has he stuck it into his shirt, jacket, somehow, under his armpit with his reins? How do you lose, sir, going from point A to point B, which is about a mile? You're riding across a field for about a mile. How do you lose, accidentally, a large yellow envelope that you can't apparently realize you've lost, so that you can go back, on your trail and look for it on the ground. How does that make any sense to reasonable people thinking the thing through? Now, on the other hand, you could argue that if it was a package wrapped around cigars, how easier would it be for the courier to lose it? He had it in his vest pocket, and in the movement of the horse, it falls out, and he doesn't realize that. And that seems, if you're going to take the accident route, ladies and gentlemen, I think reasonable people would think it more likely than not that you'd use that method of loss than this method. But be it as it may, ultimate question's got to be left to the jury to resolve. And with it, you resolve the question whether it was lost accidentally or lost intentionally.